Hi, everyone. Um, my name is Ayaka, and I'm a consultant with LSAT Unplugged. Alyssa is here with me today, and we're talking about all things about admissions. And today we're going to be focused on letters of continued interest. And in that, TA Gabby is here, our wonderful guest, to kind of talk through her experience in doing these letters of interest. So welcome, Gabby. Welcome.
Thank you, Ayaka, for having me. Should I do a brief introduction?
Please do.
Okay. So yes, as Ayaka mentioned, my name is Gabby and I was a TA for LSAT Unplugged. I took the January LSAT, and that was my second time sitting for the LSAT and my last time sitting for the LSAT, as I've found out like within the last couple of months that I got into a couple of Canadian law schools. So I will likely be attending Queen's Law come the fall. And so, yeah, just talking about letters of continued interest. I realize that some people choose to write them while a decision is still being made, but my, I guess, experience with letters of continued interest mainly comes down to a school that I was waitlisted for. So Ayaka, I'm not sure where you want to like me to take this, but I can keep going if you'd like. Oh, sorry, Ayaka, you're on
All
mute.
right. God, see, you think I would learn by like month 15 of the pandemic. So Alyssa is like laughing at me. So first, just so people know what the letter of continued interest is, it's a letter to admissions indicating the fact that you are still interested in being admitted to the school, especially as decisions start coming out. And we all know it's rolling admissions for most law schools out there. So the closer you are to spring, maybe going into summer, schools are kind of finalizing what their incoming class looks like. And with that, you might be on a wait list, your decision might not have come yet. And law schools might be in the dark about whether you've been accepted and taking a seat at a different program, a different school, or if you're waiting for answers from, multiple different schools. So really that letter of continued interest is to say that you are still interested in attending a school. Anything to add there, Gabby, Alyssa?
No, I mean, I like that you pressed on that. I would emphasize it is to express continued interest. So, I mean, I can speak to this with my experience, but I think one of the common temptations for students writing letters of continued interest is to make it another personal statement or provide new information. But I think it's really important to keep the purpose of that letter in mind, and that is to express continued interest. And I think that, whether you believe that new information will help the law school or not, fitting it within that narrative is really important, because ultimately it says this is a student who can write well and ultimately follow directions. So, yeah.
I love that Gabby just pointed out writing well, following directions, and staying focused in terms of what a continued letter of interest really is. And I also just wanted to say that I know like applicants like myself that are first generation, I did not know that continued letters of interest were even a thing. And I sort of come from a cultural background that if I'm waitlisted, your tail just goes between your legs and you're like, okay, I'll just wait. And I had no idea that this was a possibility and also something that could be like learned about. So that's, I think, is a fantastic point that you just made, Gabby.
And Alyssa, I love the point that you made right now. And, it's a little bit of an elusive thing, right? There's not a lot of direction out there on what to write, how to write it, when to write it. I do think maybe if it's been weeks and weeks since you've turned in an application, you haven't heard anything, and especially because it's rolling applications, then maybe a continued interest letter would be good. It might be good after you've been waitlisted. I I know in your case, Gabby, it was prompted and you had direction as to like where to send a letter of interest if you are interested in writing one. I know there are schools out there who called it another essay and said, write another statement if you have additional information or you want to, you know, express interest. And here's where I would love to double click into your experience, Gabby. How did that letter of interest kind of action item come forth for you in your application cycle?
Yeah, so I think that because really we can break this into like, when do you write a letter of continued interest? How often do you write them? And how do you write them? And so in terms of when, to Alyssa's point, I am also a first generation law school applicant technically within my immediate family. And so I didn't really have experience or prior knowledge as to what a letter of continued interest was, which is why I ended up writing mine when I got waitlisted, because I essentially had direct instruction to write a letter of continued interest. However, I know that some people write them throughout the application process as decisions are being made, if that's a law school that they really want to go to. And I think that that shows a really strong interest. And if you can do that well, I would. But I think for me, my decision to write one was I got waitlisted for a school that I would really love to go to. And I'm still waiting to hear what the status of that admission is. But I got the waitlist, and then it said basically, you know, you can write a letter of continued interest if you'd like to. And then it reminded me, you know, this letter is not another personal statement, but feel free to share personal accomplishments or essentially anything, any recent updates that have come to light since submitting your application. And so that was in April that I got that letter. And so for 2 weeks, I kind of sat on that decision, and I just thought about how I wanted to communicate my, you know, accomplishments or updates and what I wanted to highlight. And in the end, Ayaka saw that letter. So she can, if you remember Ayaka, you can like fill in the blanks. But for me, what I realized was I really want to go to this school because of the specific joint degree program that they offer, and because of a center for sustainability that they have within their law school. And so I had communicated that through my personal statement, and my interest in that area of law, which for context is energy and environmental law, had been expressed quite strongly throughout my application, just based on my experiences and what I chose to write my personal statement about. For background, I'm from Calgary, and both of my parents worked in energy. And so that was a focus area that I felt personally connected to and very passionate about in my personal life. And so I wanted that letter to express my interest and a specific interest in that, but also build on what I had already said in my personal statement. So I wasn't saying, you know, in addition to environment and energy law, I'm really interested in human rights law. And that's not because I'm not interested in human rights law, but because I thought it was really important to be consistent with my letter and to just build on what I had already said so that I could go into more detail than I would be able to if I had chosen to go a very different direction. And then in addition to that, so I put some thought into, oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I do have a question about that. I think it's so important, and Ayaka and I have talked about this before. So you write this letter and you go deeper into what you had originally stated as your main point of interest. And I think that that's really, really interesting, instead of, you know, like saying, well, wait, I'm also interested in XYZ, even though you genuinely are, in an attempt to make you look like, well, it's instead of attempting to make yourself look more like interesting, of like, oh, I could do all of these different things, you're going deeper into what you originally stated. And this might be a little bit off topic here, or maybe it's a little bit too off the far of the road, but how did you go about writing deeper about the subject that you're interested in, but not repeating from the personal statement? Did you come up with like ideas, or you're like, could I talk about another example that I haven't already talked about? Where did you start on that process? And I'm sorry to cut you off too, as if you
Oh,
need to
no
finish
worries.
your thought.
I'm glad that you cut me off because this is a good point to stop. So I can just break down how my personal statement looked in the end. So it was 3 or 4 paragraphs, but the first paragraph was, I am still interested in your law school. And that was short and sweet. And this is why. And so I'm interested in your law school because of this program. The second paragraph, in answer to your question, Alyssa, is where I chose to build on that interest. And so luckily, I had an experience this term where I had the opportunity to work on a project for a First Nations group in Canada that was related to this interest, where, you know, I was essentially working with this First Nations group to determine how they could use land that they had within their territory. And part of that was, we established that one of the ways that they could use that land was solar farming. And through that experience, I realized there was a lot of gaps in my knowledge that a legal education could have filled, and just a lot of different areas that were intersecting with environment and energy law, because this First Nations group is a self-governing nation. And so I chose that experience because it was recent, because it built on my application, and because it was directly related to my interest. And that wasn't, I didn't do that project at all because that was the intention. It was just, in a way, I got really lucky that I had that opportunity and that it fits so beautifully within that narrative.
And that was your continued letter of interest, not your personal statement.
Yeah, so that was in my continued letter of interest. And I had also asked the nation, you know, at the time, I said, hey, is it okay if I, you know, speak to this experience that I've had with you in this letter? And they said, yeah, we'd be happy to be included. So I got lucky that I had that experience, and that the nation was allowed me to involve them in my admissions application, I suppose, in an indirect way.
Yeah, and just for clarity, can you give the time when you turned in your full application, and then when you turned in this letter of interest, so we have a little bit of a time frame?
Yeah, so I submitted my application, I believe, on January 30th, and then I got that decision on April 15th, and then I submitted that letter of continued interest, I think April 27th or 30th or something like that. So within 2 weeks. The point is, I didn't wait long to write that letter or to submit it, but I was very deliberate and intentional with how I crafted that letter. And I think I had many versions of that letter because I really wanted it to be written well, and I wanted it to be concise. In the end, it was only a page long, but the point was to say I expressed interest. I told them something new about myself that built on the application, built on the story that I had already told them, about the things that were important to me. And then in addition to that, I did provide a few updates related to personal and academic accomplishments in that was another concluding paragraph, but really the bulk of it was that experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that you're adding and not repeating stuff, but it's still consistent. And I know you emphasize it's like it has to be consistent, and I love that. Mm-hmm. Also, I ask about the time frame because the frame is about 3 months, right, between when you submitted. So, you know, even in that 3 months, you're still living a life. You're still, you were still in school. So there are things to update. And you know, sometimes when we think about our lives and how fast our lives are going, 3 months is so quick that you're like, nothing happened. But actually, you are working on stuff, and there's things to update there. So encouraging others to write a letter of interest. You know, I think it's great that you had something, you know, a part of what you are interested in, deeply interested in, to kind of show and share admissions. But even if you're just working in general, there's things to update. So I love that. And remind me, you said you included a little bit of an academic update as well, right?
I did, yeah, because I had been waitlisted, and I had been asked to send in my grades as soon as they became available. I thought it would be useful to say, this is the GPA I expect to have this term, or that I'm on track to have. This is the day that I expect to be able to send my grades in, and this is what I expect to graduate with.
Amazing. Awesome. And I've seen this letter, a couple iterations of the letter.
Yeah, a few.
A few. And I think we talked a little bit about, how much information to include in that letter, right? And I remember this story about the First Nations very well because, I think maybe in the first iteration it had a couple more stories in it, but I don't remember the last one. Did we trim it down to just that one story, or I think it might have had another?
Yeah, so I think that that's a good point, Ayaka. So this experience that I had, like I said, the issues that I came across in doing my research pointed to various gaps in my knowledge that I had that a legal education would have been useful for. And the temptation in telling that story was to be as informative as possible and to describe the knowledge gaps and to go into what exact legal areas that I could have focused on more, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But in the end, I was reminded continuously by wonderful editors like Ayaka that the point is to tell a story and inform them of that experience for the purpose of expressing continued interest. And so I think it's important if you have an experience like that, or you have a story that you specifically want to tell, the admissions committee, they don't need to know the specifics about the area of law. You want to be specific as to what you're interested in. But I mean, for me to convince an admissions committee that I know exactly what area of environment and energy law would have been useful to me in this experience is not necessarily, I don't think it's very conducive of their time, because that's why I'm going to law school, to figure that out. And so I think that you've got to really decide to what you're going to highlight within the pieces of your story and how you're going to fit your interest into those pieces.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really love, though, the point that you keep bringing up about having a very tailored and centered story about yourself, because I have seen a few continued letters of interest where the person has gone on the website and basically regurgitated some of the accolades that they're reading that the school has, and taking a step farther, maybe even repeating some accolades that some of the professors have, grabbing a few professors and repeating the accolades and saying, and that is why I want to go to your school. So I would say that's probably what not to do instead of telling a personal story. So I love that you are bringing up this very small tailored story, not the length of an entire personal statement, but to show that what you say your interests are actually your interests.
Yeah, and it's good. It's great that you bring that up, Alyssa, because I feel like when you're navigating a law school and you're choosing whether to apply for that law school, at least when I was writing my personal statements or even the letter, at times it was, oh my gosh, well, there genuinely are so many reasons why I'd like to go to this law school. Maybe they have like an externship program that I'm really interested. Maybe their location is where I'd like to be. Plus the areas of law that they might focus in, or a professor that I've read his research paper and it was great, or her research paper and it was great. But I think at the end of the day, if you're going to say you're interested in a law school for reason X, ask yourself why you're interested in that, and then explain that. And then if you can explain that, showcase why you're interested in that. So if you say you're interested, you explain why you're interested, but you have nothing to showcase that interest, it's not very convincing, and anybody could choose a topic to be interested in and write about. But if you have experiences that really emphasize that, nobody can take that away from you. And that's really what makes you unique.
Right. And remind me, did you speak to a specific program at the school that you're interested in, or a specific clinic, or did you just kind of say, this is why I'm interested in going to this school?
There was a specific joint degree program, or there is a specific joint degree program that this school offers. Yeah.
Okay. So, and you included that in your letter, right?
Yeah. And I included that in my letter. And actually, one of the things that I did prior to even writing the letter was I went back to my personal statement and I looked at what I said, and I looked at how I articulated myself and the story that I told. And so that was a guiding point, I'd say.
I love that you said you went back to your personal statement, because really that is, if done properly, right, the essence of who you are and why you're kind of going to law school. And I remember yours, it was very heavily like why you want to go to law school and why you sort of need to go to law school. So there are schools out there that say you don't need to touch on that, but I remember yours being very clearly in the lane of like, this is why I want to go to law school. And in that same vein, the letter of continued interest is that extension of that. Not a personal statement, but an extension of like why you want to go to a specific program. Is that the right understanding?
Yeah, totally. And I personally struggled in my process to make these statements and letters personal enough. And so that was, again, another reason why I thought the experience route was great. But, even if an individual doesn't have new experiences that they feel passionate about or that they want to share in the past few months, the reality is, at the same time, I also took a class in energy policy and governance that I thought was really cool. And if given the opportunity, I could have probably gone on for 10 pages about what I liked about that class. But if that class or even if it was a podcast, that I had listened to that was important or that I personally resonated with for a reason, that's personal and that matters. And so I wouldn't discount, it doesn't need to be a big fancy experience. It just has to be something unique to you.
I can't believe you're mentioning this, or I can, because I was just about to point out that I have been trying to figure out how to get more applicants to succinctly answer the question, why do you want to go to law school? Especially because as adults, even if you are coming straight out of an undergraduate program and you've gone all the way like K, you've not skipped any years, even if you're graduating from an undergraduate program and you've gone all the way straight through, you're still of adult age. So you have all these years of life experience. And it's really easy, I think, for people to feel that they're not enough, or something that they've gone through, the things that interest them, true actual stories and tangible things that they're up to is not enough. And so they defer to these large statements of like, I want to save the world, or I need to save the trees. That's so belittling of what's really going on here. I'm really bad at coming up with examples, but what I'm trying to say is exactly what you were saying in terms of like looking inward and saying, what have I been doing? And being a really good writer about that, not making something up, not saying I just care a lot about all these people or all these things, and actually just leaning into what someone is just doing from day to day.
Yeah. And I think, my statements and my letters, like Ayaka said, really, I would say maybe, and even maybe too much, were heavily weighed on the why law school side. But to Alyssa's point on articulating what makes you a person, I mean, time and time again, we've heard from admissions members of admissions committee, I want to know who you are. And so tell them who you are. And for me, that involved speaking to my experiences that I could showcase why I was showcase an area that I was passionate about through an experience. But if that's not going to be the same for everyone, right? And my I guess strategy, whether intentionally or not, for writing letters of continued interest was to write a 2, because I actually ended up writing a second. But some people choose to write them, every 2 weeks or something. And I would say that you really have to do what works for you. And to just go back to how personal this process is, if you're writing one, if you're the kind of person, if I were to write a or a letter of continued interest every 2 weeks, it wouldn't be very strong because I'm speaking to my experiences. That was my strategy throughout my admissions process. But some people don't have that strategy. And so maybe writing one every 2 weeks makes sense for you. But I didn't have new experiences to share every 2 weeks. I had one or two that I wanted to share that had happened in 3 months. So I would say reflect on what your strategy was, and how you articulated yourself in your statements.
That's wonderful advice, because the updating every 2 weeks, yeah, they'll see the letter, and it might be that if you're not updating and providing new information, they're just gonna be like, okay, yeah, we see it again, and maybe not even, not to say that they're not going to open it, but kind of breeze through it, and if they don't see content there. Whereas I distinctly remember yours, Gabby, like your personal statement, that first letter you sent, like there's distinct content there that's different, and yet talking about the same interest. And so I think you're completely right in like, what is the impact you want the letter to have, and kind of think about that. And and that's in the same way of like how to write it, what to write about, and how that's going to impact the application as a whole. I think in the interview that I just did with admissions director Andrea Fitzgerald, she was talking about how the personal statement is, a way for you to connect with admissions. And I think for any sort of written portion of the application, it's this like human moment to connect, because not all law schools do interviews. So the only way to connect on a human level is really through this writing, and it's another piece of writing that you're sending to admission. So you really want it to connect on an emotional human level. And
Yeah.
I know yours, because I'm like, it's full of passion. Yeah, I'm like, I know this is Gabby's.
Oh, thank you, Ayaka. But I mean, yeah, I don't want to, and I certainly don't want to discount anyone that chose to write letters more often than not. But to your point, Ayaka, if you're thinking about, I think that with everything you send to an admissions committee, just given that these are individuals spending a ton of time and, emotional energy into choosing the right applicants for their law school, I think it's important to just be conscientious of their time as people. And so if you can't answer the question of, does this give an admissions committee member a better picture of who I am, or does this provide new information? If the answer is no to, both of those questions or either of those questions, I mean, I would really, second guess whether that letter is necessary or whether fewer is better than more. Because ultimately too, like I had a lot of versions of that letter of continued interest. Like I can be completely honest, there's like 30 different versions. Not that that's necessary or anything, but the point is that I really wanted to write something of quality, and that took time, and that took people looking at it for me and saying, I think that this could be stronger, or have you considered this, or I wasn't sure on what what you meant there. Those things take time. So if you can't put the investment in every 2 weeks, then is it worth it, and can it hurt you? I don't know.
Right.
What I really like about you bringing up that there's a famous poet, and I wish I could remember, because I always talk about this. They say a line of something, it's a love letter, and they said, I'm sorry, if I had had more time, it would have been shorter. Because sometimes saying things directly takes more thought and takes a more critical look at what you're saying, and do you mean everything you're saying, and are you saying what you mean in a way that matters. And I really like that, Gabby, you and I, we like studied together. It feels now like a year ago, but one of my favorite things about studying for the LSAT with you was you always had this general attitude of critical is good.
Mhm.
And I hear that coming through with the way that you approached your essays and your applications. And Ayaka and I, we look at essays, we edit essays quite often now. We do weekly sessions on essay workshops. And people, I find some applicants are trying to get something done quickly, or maybe they're defending a reason that they've written something. And I really encourage everyone to sort of try on the attitude that you sort of, it seems to try on for multiple areas of your life, of a critical eye is healthy. You know, somebody saying, maybe you re-say this, you know, this sentence is a little, whatever the expression of the person that you're working with, it seems like you're willing to try it on, but you're also critical of not only your own work, you're critical of what everyone says to you. So you're sort of always like churning ideas over, not necessarily coming at it from a defense, not coming at it from an offense, just like a churning of ideas over and over until it feels right for you. Would you say that that's sort of like how you approach the essays?
Yeah, and I really appreciate that comment, Alyssa. That's very sweet. Because yeah, I think that at the end of I had a professor once tell me that there's two pieces to writing anything. There's the writer and there's the editor. The writer writes for the writer, the editor writes for the reader. And I think that's really important because oftentimes, at least in my application process, I found I would get attached to statements or ideas or things that I felt were really important to communicate, but that didn't mean anything to the reader or, didn't convey anything new. And the people that I had supporting me through that process, like Ayaka, were thankfully very honest with me. And so, they would say like, hey, like that, like sounds good, but it means nothing. And sometimes you have to suck that up and say, yeah, you know what, you're right. I just like the way that sounds, or I like the way that's written. But if it's not anything of substance, like this is a person that's reading words on a piece of paper, and that is all they will know about you, unless you are lucky enough to get an interview or make face-to-face contact. And so the fact that those words have to, not only resonate with this person, but give them a fair and true representation of who you are, that deserves thought, and that takes a lot of thought. And it's not going to be, a first draft, So I think critical is a good way to put that, but I don't think that, some people might get afraid when they say that, but I don't think there's anything to be afraid of if you trust that throughout the application process is an iterative process, and you have to trust that the people that you have supporting you and every, thought that you're going to put into that is going to make it a better written statement, or is going to make it, there's going to be improvement, but that takes, some patience.
Right. Absolutely. And I hope that point that you just made gets clipped and is highlight for LSAT Unplugged, because I think that's an amazing thing you just said. I'm like, that is the golden statement.
I feel it too, like golden,
right.
like oh, like everyone listen to Gabby. Yeah.
Stupid question for you, Gabby. Did you write this letter in a form of a letter? Like
yes.
In a letter format?
Yes. I took it very seriously because of how deeply I am interested in this law school. So yes, it was written completely in letter format. I had my signature on there and everything. And because I'm very extra, I decided to put the header in the school's colors, which maybe was unnecessary, but I thought that was a nice touch. So there you go.
And did you get it notarized? And I'm kidding.
I did not get it notarized. No.
I was just going
not
to ask
a witness sign off.
Did you spray the perfume on it like Elle Woods and Legally Blonde?
If I could have done that in some kind of virtual way, I would have, just for a nice personal touch. But
right. Yeah, and I do want to put out there that there are schools that ask not for a letter of continued interest, but a statement of, not a personal statement, but another statement. They might give you a prompt. So it doesn't all have to be in a form of a letter. I believe yours, Gabby, they asked for a letter, correct?
Yeah, they asked for a letter and they didn't say, please put it in this format. But if somebody asks you for a letter, you
Is
put it in
right.
the format of a letter. Yeah.
And part of that is, can you follow directions, right? Even if it is not as a formal letter, but you want to show that you can follow directions in that sense.
Yeah, and Ayaka, now that you bring that up, I'll bring this up too. I think it's when I was reading my waitlisted decision, essentially, there was actually a section that said that I was not to make any contact with admissions committee member. So even in normal times, I would not be allowed to go up to the admissions office and ask questions, should that be an option. And I took that very seriously because in this, I think it's, personally, I value a true representation of people and giving everyone equal opportunities. And so I recognize that in order to do that, if that means that you don't meet with admissions committee member because you recognize that they might have a bias towards certain personality type or whatever it may be, then I respect that. But that meant that I, just put my letter into a Dropbox and that was it. I didn't email it to anybody. So yeah, things like that, I have no idea if that would have disqualified me, but I wouldn't have wanted it to. So
Right. Yeah.
I also wanted to, just for clarity, I think it is a nice touch that you made the header colors in the colors of the school. I think that that's perfectly fine.
Thank you, Alyssa.
I made the joke about Elwoods, but that was just to be fun. I do approve of your choice.
Thank you.
Well, very cool. Gabby, thank you for sharing your experience. I learned a lot kind of asking you these, but also kind of, watching you go through that process. And I'm also a first generation law school potential student. And, and it was something that I was like, I know it's out there. I don't know when to actually do it and, what to put in it. And this has given a lot of clarity. So I appreciate you sharing your experience here, Gabby. Alyssa, any other questions that I might have missed?
No, I feel like this was a very good 48 minutes spent of my time. I feel very fortunate, Gabby. Everything you had to say, I really valued it and I thought it was really wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, and if I may, I just have one quick question for Ayaka or for Alyssa.
Sure.
Is there anything that, and Ayaka, like you edited both my personal statement and my letter of continued interest. Is there anything that you learned from being an editor through that process?
Yeah, and I think when I first took a look at your personal statement, and this is something that you commented on earlier of like, being attached to certain things. And, I think you have a very distinct style of writing that is not my style, right? And there's a fine line between giving feedback on content and kind of trying to pull someone out of their style of writing and into mine. So that's one lesson learned. And kind of working through that. And I know we kind of worked through that for a couple weeks, right? And with this personal statement and knowing that it made me better prepared. It set me up better to kind of work on your letter of interest with you. Because I'm like, I know how you write. I know the intensity that you write, which is very different than mine. And so I was better prepared as an editor to kind of say, okay, like this is the intent. This is how you want to write. And that underlining message, does it come out as intended? And so I think coming out from that experience of a little bit more of a long-term relationship with your writing.
Mhm.
It's more learning the style and then knowing how to pick out the intent that's underlying the style. So for me, that's a lesson learned for me, and hopefully I've given you some good pointers for your
Yeah, well, I'm
Are-
learning now because I hope to be an editor for you. So
And I was just going to say, so Ayaka, are you saying that by working with someone more than once, you are able to help them further? Is that your
absolutely.
Yeah. It's so funny. So Ayaka looked at Gabby's, and I helped Ayaka with her personal statement, and I'm sure Gabby, you did as well. And I've looked at an email for Ayaka as well, so we're sort of like in a triangle here. And I I've looked at a lot of essays lately, and again, to that attachment, the writer and the attachment that they have to the story, I know that what I learned is that the more essays I read, the more I sort of got the hang of it. So I understood that if somebody, I saw how fast someone could make a point and how slow someone could make a point. And I got to the point I was at a it made me understand how much faster I could make my own points. Because again, when I'm the writer and I'm telling and sharing my own story, to a certain extent, part of it is precious. I'm sharing part of my life story. So I feel maybe extra precious about parts that are not that precious. And I'm sort of skipping over other parts of the story that maybe I'm downplaying because it's an achievement, or maybe I'm sick of it because I'm doing a career switch. I think I see a lot of that in career switches, where one of the reasons somebody is switching careers is because they don't want to do it anymore. And so they tend to blow over maybe achievements, or blow over something incredible that got them to that point in the first place. And they're focusing too much on leaving it behind. So reading a lot of essays helped me lessen up on the things that were precious to me and actually amplify things that would matter to a reader, because I started to see patterns in other people's essays, and I started to be able to make my points much faster, because I realized that somebody who is reading a lot of essays, my dog doesn't drink water all day and now she's being really loud, but as I reading a lot of essays, I'm starting to pick up on, yeah, they remember the sentence. You don't have to drive that in as much as you think that you have to drive it in.
Yeah. And the admissions committee, they won't be any different, right? They're reading a ton. So yeah.
And more than ever, it seems like.
Yeah.
Huge uptick continuing on this year. So reading thousands of applications.
Yeah.
I think it takes, I know we're wrapping up here, but I think it does take a lot of work to be yourself. And that's what a good essay is all about. Like there'll be some times where I read a really interesting essay. I'm like, wow, I want to know this person. I want to meet this person. And then it gets really awkward at the end. And they're like, and I want to go to your school because, and then they like repeat an accolade. And I'm like, why did you make it awkward? Like yourself is just enough. So I think you know, in that way, in sense, I think it's another thing I've learned about taking ownership over oneself, because I know the feeling I get when somebody seems very unique and then they start throwing in really like random things, or things that you can tell that they think an admissions officer wants to hear, and they sort of come out of themselves. They start to like try to paint it with things that sound impressive, and it's like it feels like you're at a party and like someone just starts acting weird. You're like, I liked you so much better when you're just being yourself. So I think that's another thing I've learned, is how hard that must be, because I have never seen an essay that, and again, I'm an editor, so I'm not supposed to see the last, the final thing as soon as it gets in front of me, or it would be rare, but I've never seen an essay where someone sounds like themselves from top to bottom.
I do have to say, Gabby, and I hope you take this as a positive, is that the way that you're writing, especially in that personal statement and the letter of interest, the the voice and the personality match, right? And the intensity matches. So there's nothing where it's like, oh, you write very different from how you are. And there are some people out there who are like that. So I think, not that that's a bad thing, but I think for you in particular, Gabby, it all matched. So, and I remember I saw your essay very early on when we started studying together. And as we studied together and spent a lot of time together, and I got to know you better, like the writing started to make a little bit more sense. And it's like, okay, the better advice I can give. So
yeah,
I think that's where, one shot feedback from some random person, good, because you're getting another pair of eyes on it, but working with someone and kind of getting to know someone can enhance, the editing process as well, because you understand what the person is trying to say, without being like, this sounds rude and this doesn't make any sense. So, like taking that all away, what is the essence of this person and what they're trying to communicate. So
that's so huge. That is so huge.
Agree.
It's how many times have you and I met with someone, and you meet them once and we read an essay and we think, oh, this is sort of the main point, this is what someone's trying to say, and we'll bring it to someone and they say, that's not what I'm trying to say at all. It's like, okay, that's going to actually take more time. Like Gabby keeps saying, that's actually going to take more time, and getting to know someone and their true personality does absolutely take it into a much more evolved place and true to who a person is.
Yeah. Invest in those relationships.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
And invest the time into writing these.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Gabby, for joining us. Special guest, the amazing Gabby. And thank y'all for listening in. I hope this was informative and helpful to anyone who needed this information. Yeah, so that's a wrap.
Thanks, Gabby.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.